So Michele, Klein, Solomon, thank you very much for participating today in the Autumn Academy and for your very impressive presentation on the development of a global compact on safer and orderly migration. Would you like to sum up your key points of your presentation?
Sure, and thank you very much for the chance to be here. It's really a pleasure to be here at Oxford at Compass with you. Really value the work that you're doing here. So the key points are that there is a unique historic opportunity here now that the governments of the world have decided to develop a global compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. And that this needs to be seen as an opportunity to really set a course and an agenda on migration for the decades to come, and one that sees migration fundamentally as a positive and really looks at how to empower individuals to have opportunities to migrate as a matter of choice and for a whole host of reasons, and sees human mobility as a positive factor, and that also provides governments with the tools they need to be able to manage migration effectively and in a truly cooperative spirit. So I think we're at the beginning of what will be a longer-term global agenda on migration that really changes the way that governments and societies think about that. And migration is, of course, very complex, and but we have to remember that it's fundamentally about human beings at the center, and human beings with aspirations to live safe and productive lives. And while I believe that we will not see the end of the nation state as a defining characteristic in our world anytime in the near future, and governments absolutely retain the sovereign discretion to determine which non-nationals to admit and for what purposes in their territories, that there is a way to marry these ideas and to have human mobility in a positive way and really see the richness that individuals bring, and at the same time a degree of public support and sense of confidence in the ability of governments to manage migration more effectively.
Thank you. And talking about specifically on irregular migrants,
yes.
It was really interesting to see how you said that irregular migrants were mentioned in all the discussions that you have been having for the development of a global compact. Why would you say that irregular migrants are so crucial in these discussions, and how agreement could be reached, according to you, on the issues specifically focusing on irregular migration?
Sure, and I know it's a very good question. So, of course, the Global Compact is set out to facilitate safe, regular, and orderly. But the inverse is, and the expectation is, to really look at what causes irregular migration and how to reduce both the incidence of irregular migration and the impacts of it. So, really trying to break down what is irregular migration? Why do people migrate irregularly? What are the factors in countries of origin that lead people to move irregularly? What happens in transit and route that leads to exploitation and irregularity? And what happens in destinations? What draws people to come irregularly or to change from a regular to an irregular status? What are the factors? And but really break down what irregular migration is about. So not just a single label, but really look at the circumstances that drive irregularity in all kinds of different contexts. Look at what the impacts are. Look at what the rights are of individuals regardless of their migration status. And look at what different actors need to do to try to both reduce irregularity, but also open up more opportunities. And part of what I mean by that is that there is clearly a recognition that part of the reason that irregular migration is a problem and that irregular migration exists to the extent that it exists is there are not adequate legal channels for migration and at all skills levels. And that there's clearly a demand for migration in many destination countries that is being filled by migrants in an irregular situation that really ought to be where it would be in everybody's interest if those situations were regularized and if there were more readily accessible legal channels for migration. And obviously, as an international community and as individual nations and individual communities, we need to look at what compels people to move, not only on the refugee side, conflict and persecution, but also other forms of rights violations or lack of opportunity, and really look at what it is that compels people to feel that they can't live safe and productive lives at home, and how do we address that in the world so that people are not compelled to the degree. So I think the opportunity here with this symposium over the course of the next several days to really break down how does irregularity occur and what can be done to really have a much more nuanced, much more granular discussion, and not just irregular migration bad, irregular migrants bad, but it as somehow a more refined understanding and therefore more tailored policy responses.
Thank you very much. A very last and quick question. It was very interesting to hear how you compared environmentalist discussions and discussion at UN and global level on migration, and you said that this is the real beginning of those discussions. Migration is not a new phenomenon, but you said that the development of a global compact is a really key step at UN level, and is a new beginning. How is that so, and how the global compact can be transformative?
No, and it's a great question, and I think that this is the key point to recognize that this is a very important historical opportunity. And I think the grounding was with the Sustainable Development Agenda in 2015, and really recognizing that migrants and migration contribute to inclusive growth and sustainable development, and that we need to understand the migratory phenomenon as something that is of global concern in a positive way as well as in a negative way, and that this is the moment to really work toward how to let me start in another way. Really, how to stimulate migration that really benefits all around. If you look at there's a recent McKinsey report that talks about migrants being only 3.5% of the world population, but producing more than 9% of global GDP, which is obviously so much more than if people had stayed at home. And that's, at a macro level, but think about it at the micro level, at individual families and households where migrants abroad make it possible for people to have education, healthcare, so much at home, that there are now, not taking away from the need for countries to develop and to reduce poverty over at home, but seeing migration as sometimes a major way and a major strategy for poverty reduction and for opportunities. So it's really thinking about migration in a fundamentally different way, and that's the opportunity that we have with first the recognition of migration within the Sustainable Development Agenda and recognizing its positive potential, and now taking that to a different level and really looking at, well, how do you actually realize that positive potential? What are the steps that need to be put in place? What are the mechanisms at the national level and at the cooperation level that really realize that positive cycle of migration? And that's what we have the opportunity to do now. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.